The Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray.
Good afternoon. You're listening to, or I should say watching, USLA Media. This is the Republican Zone. I am your host, Drew Murray, and I am here with my good friend, former Councilman David O., Mayoral Candidate David O. So thank you for coming on my show.
Thanks for the invitation, Drew. We always have a good conversation.
Yes, so I'm sure you're busy. You're in the middle of a mayoral campaign.
As are you. We're both busy.
Yes, I'm in the middle of a city council race, and you are in the middle of a mayoral race.
Yes.
So what's happening over the summer? I know on the city council side, it slows up a little bit, but I imagine in a mayoral race, that's a little different. So what are you doing over the summer to keep yourself busy, which I know you're totally busy about?
Yeah, I'm busy every day. I don't take a vacation. I don't take a break. Election day is November 7th. Now, I lied because my mother-in-law flew in from Korea, so I am going to take her someplace. I will actually take 2 days off, take my family someplace with mom-in-law, but outside of that, I really don't. I think what I do, like right now, there's a lot of kind of infrastructure of the campaign that has to be done. Because there's a real mismatch in terms of money, organization, and things like that. So I would be the underdog in that scenario. On the other hand, people are looking for a change. They're looking for something very different than kind of like what's been going on in the past, and I do represent that change. That's the whole grassroots type of thing. The other thing is focusing on solutions. It's one thing to have an idea, best practices, theory. It's another thing to actually find the people that really have the on-the-ground expertise and commitment, and to bring them together, those that can work together, to begin to refine how you implement changes, who's going to do it, how you fund it, and what is the better way to do it. And actually, I think a lot of that, at least for me, I don't know about other people, stems from kind of like your broad, deeper perspectives on life and things like that. So let's say we're talking about returning citizens. We have over 300,000 people that have been in prison living in our city. And when they go to prison, while they're in prison, many times, for example, they have children. And so they could not possibly be engaged with their children the way we would like them to be, those that want to be involved with their children. But what is the barrier to them being engaged with their children? In other words, let's say they committed a crime, but they did not hurt their children. And while they are incarcerated, can we maintain that relationship of father to son, father to daughter, father to mother? Can we keep them part of the family, part of the community, part of the neighborhood? Because we do want rehabilitation. They're doing their time. That is what the judge said. That is what the jury said. But there will come a time for many of them where they're returning to the community, and what they hope not to return to is a dysfunctional family with tragedy and violence and things like that. So in that situation, part of what I'm talking about is a philosophy or a perspective on the wholeness of the family, and the importance of the family to the neighborhood and the neighborhood to the community. So how will we deal with violence? You can put money into it, but money is not going to solve the pain and the hurt that oftentimes results in a lot of the violence that we see. Restoration of the family is important. Now, for those who don't really believe in family, this is not the kind of like what they want to hear. But I look at it differently. I look at it this way. You have a community of a whole, right? So you have your elders with their experience and wisdom. You have, let's say, the caretaker, the mother. You have the provider, the father. It could be reversed. The caretaker could be the father. The provider could be the mother. You oftentimes in a village have the artisans, the business people, the instructors, the teachers. You have all of that. You also have the warriors. Now, in our society, we have decided that something is wrong with the warriors. And therefore, they have PTSD, they have bad experiences, they have violent past, and whether they are someone from the streets of Philadelphia who's incarcerated or they're a veteran.
And what do you mean by warrior?
Someone who's been engaged in the combat, physical.
Like ex-military?
Like military or like gang member or
Okay.
like violent person
So
on the street.
some legal.
Some legal
somewhere
warriors. They have
some-
been engaged in the conflicts and the combat, and I think that kind of looking at these people as being like people that should be removed, because that's a very common thought, right? In other words, if you are someone who was involved in violent crimes, you grew up in a bad neighborhood, if you were someone who served in combat, you came back, kind of like damaged goods. And I think that presumes that they don't have something to contribute. And I think they have a lot to contribute because their experiences and their perspectives, even if it's one of regret, I think is important in sharing. And they have a role. And if their contribution is not available, then I think it's artificial. What happens is young people will experience conflicts, will experience dangers, will experience disappointments. And there's someone who's been through all of that to kind of give their perspectives. And if they are rehabilitating themselves, they have something to share. So I'm more of the fact that if we take people that they're actually, if they're not a danger to their children, which most of them are not, the hard knocks of life are important for them to share. And I think that is why we have a role in restoring families and restoring communities, and I believe that is a critical part of addressing the wanton violence in our city.
And is this while they're incarcerated? You're saying that we should be working with them to
Yes.
to educate them, to
Like, in other
give them
words,
some sort of services that they need while they are incarcerated?
they should not lose contact with their children, even while they're incarcerated. From Zooming, like a Zoom meeting, going over the homework with their children, to talking them about their special project in school, to kind of watching them as they watch play the piano or learn to play the piano. I think if they have that contribution, or to play a game of chess with their children. Obviously they can't do that 24/7, but I do think those are valuable things. And the issue is, well, if you set up something like that, is there a chance for someone who is ill-minded to take advantage of that situation to promote crime, criminal activity? Yes, it is. But what is the good of it? And I think that's where we have to go. We have to go in that direction. And I think it's important that someone who has done wrong, who is now paying the price, have something to look forward to, have a redemption in their life through, for example, guiding their children not to make the same mistakes, and then coming out having that bond. We have seen time and time again, no matter what the circumstance is, no matter let's say the issues about the parent, but that connection between the child and the parent is very important to the child.
And if they have that connection when they do go out, when they leave prison, when they're no longer incarcerated, you would think at least that recidivism is going to decrease, and they're not going to want to go back. But if they lose that relationship,
So
then
next, if you have a transitional period where first of all, they should not have broken their bonds with their family. But if they are transitioning out and easing back in, making amends to the community, finding a job, doing all those things, it's more likely they'll come back into a more stable, supportive, loving situation where they have a contribution to make. If they have not been connected to the community, a transitional period would help them to get their things in order, to get adjusted to the idea of getting back in the community, the neighborhood, through a process of being acclimated back into the community, reestablishing connection, things like that. But my whole point to this very long story, Drew, is either you start with the idea that something about that relationship and the roles and duties that are involved in that relationship is important to healing, giving purpose, and turning a bad situation into something that is more positive and does not lead to another cycle of, children who are angry, upset, frustrated, deprived of their family, and more likely to end up in a life of crime and a cycle of violence.
Sure. And so let's get a little bit into, what happens before someone's incarcerated. I know when I'm on the campaign trail, there's the top three issues are crime, crime, and crime.
Yes.
That's not what it was like when we ran in 2019. It was important, but
Right.
we talked about the tax abatement. We talked about taxes in general.
Right, sure.
We talked about education.
Yes.
And we did talk about crime, but now it's like, not that those issues aren't important. Education is obviously extremely important, but all people want to talk about is crime. And that's crime from as low as retail theft to illegal ATVs and dirt bikes on the street,
Right.
to unfortunately murder. So it's the whole gamut, and that's every forum I've gone to, every event that I've gone to. That is what people want to talk about. So, and I assume you're hearing the same things.
Oh, absolutely. And in addition to which, every survey and every poll affirms what you're saying, that the crime, violent crime in particular, is the number one issue it's not even close.
Exactly.
The next kind of priority of importance to people is very small compared to crime.
And we're losing population for the first time.
We're
And
losing
it's 'cause
teachers.
People
We're
are
losing
tired of the
social
crime.
workers. Yeah, we're losing all kinds of people.
Losing.
Don't want to be tourists. People don't want to come back to work.
Exactly. And the city of Philadelphia itself.
Yeah.
Well, police officers were short almost 1,000 police officers.
1,300.
But across the entire spectrum of municipal employees.
Right.
I think it's one in five.
Right.
And it's because people don't want to come to the city. They maybe don't want to live in the city. And a controversial topic that has come up in the mayor's race is stop and frisk. It was something that was done under Mayor Nutter, under Mayor Kenny. He stopped it. What are your thoughts on stop and frisk?
Well,
And if people don't know, you're an attorney.
yeah, I'm a former prosecutor, and I'm a very strong advocate for law enforcement enforcing the laws, and I believe in the deterrence effect of community policing, things like that. Stop and frisk, it arises under circumstances, is not something that can be manufactured. What happens is, if I'm a police officer, I receive information, for example, that the crime just occurred and that someone with a red jacket and blonde hair, 6'2", white pants is running from the scene, and I look over and there's someone matching the description coming from very close to that area running in my direction. So I can investigate. In other words, I don't know if that's the person, but they match the description. So I can stop the person and I can engage in an investigation. I cannot search them because there's no reason for me to do that. It is when, however, I have a reasonable, articulable suspicion that they are armed and dangerous. So the next thing is, in addition to the description, this person, 6'2", red jacket, blonde hair, white pants, and all that, had a 9mm semi-automatic weapon. Now, when I stop them for my own protection as a human being, as a police officer, I can let them know I'm investigating, let them know why I stopped them, and let them know that because the person was reportedly armed and dangerous, I am going to conduct a lawful pat-down of your outer clothing to see if you are carrying a weapon. If I do not feel the butt of a gun or the barrel of a gun or something that could be a weapon, I cannot go further in the search. Now, it's important because the police are the enforcers of the law. They are the enforcers of the Constitution. They shall not break the law in conducting, what they're doing, because that would be contradictory. And it creates many, many problems, and that is the fear of abuse of law enforcement, right? The ones who are supposed to protect you and your rights are abusing your rights. So what happens is when someone says, as in this campaign, that they're going to bring back constitutional stop and frisk in that fashion, I would just say it can't be done.
But the way, but you just described sounds like it would be stop and frisk, but it would be allowable under the Constitution.
That circumstance,
the way you just explained
yeah, the way
it, yeah.
that I explained it, that's constitutional stop and frisk. What is not a good idea, and I think nothing but a violation of law, is to send police officers out with the intention of looking at people without, one, having information they were involved in a crime. They're simply hanging out in the park and they don't want to go home. Two, you don't have any idea that they're armed and dangerous. You can't just fabricate it. You just can't say, like, this guy looks like he's armed and dangerous. Let me pat him down. That would be a violation. The same thing is I can't look at your house and say, who's got a green door? Only drug dealers. Let me kick that door in with no warrant, see what I find. And if I happen to find drugs, that doesn't mean it's okay what I did, right? In other words, that would be a violation of the Constitution. It is important that the people who enforce the law do it objectively and legally, do it lawfully, and they do it with a coolness and a calmness. They should not be doing things with emotion, anger, suspicion, prejudice, any of those type of things. And I simply tell, for example, we're on the Republican zone. We are not North Korea. If you want to start as a mayor having your police go out and breaking the law, you will have a very incorrect type of police department. You'll be a very wrong mayor, and the consequences of which is you'll have a adverse situation between the people that are supposed to be protected, who the police are serving, and the officers themselves. Now, if they are conducting themselves in that manner because that's what you trained them to do and you instructed them to do that, then you are training them and instructing them to do the wrong thing. It will be very difficult to turn that around once you've done it. Now, the second thing is this. You don't have to do things like that. I don't have to kick in people's door and look for drugs where they're not supposed to be found. Just with every other thing the city does. In other words, it's not just the police. It's L&I, it's the property assessments, it's the health department. Everything that the city does, if it does not abide by the law, if it ends up breaking the law for the greater good, let's say there's a higher purpose there. Breaking the law, is the wrong thing for the city to do.
Do you remember, and if you don't, because this was a long time ago, under Mayor Nutter, he, quote unquote, allowed stop and frisk or permitted it. Was it done legally then, or was the definition of stop and frisk that the police officers were instructed to do, was it illegal? Was it different?
Illegal. It was illegal. Listen, what happened is this. There's a good intention, right? There was murders, and particularly in places like West Philly, it was black on black for the most part, right? And so with the idea of let's stop the murder, people were frustrated. How come there's all these murders? It's so dangerous. We've got to save lives. So the idea was, let's send the police, let's flood the area with police, or let's certainly put more police there. And the whole idea was, let's basically force people to not be in the streets. Let's push people out from hanging out where they're getting shot, things like that. Now, by the way, they do have a right to be there. And so officers, usually from another police district where there were not murders, typically like the 15th Police District, where Mayfair, Tacony, places like that, where they have quality of life crimes, they would take the officers who are typically white and send them to West Philly, where the typically black population, with the instructions to make sure that people aren't loitering, hanging around the streets, all that, and to move people along, they would basically stop and frisk them. You know, what are you doing out here? You know, and so you'd be discouraged from hanging out or not leaving, because if you were hanging out, you'd get stopped and frisked. If they told you to leave and you said, well, I don't have to leave, and actually you're correct, and now you get stopped and frisked, right? So the thing is, if they do find something or if they don't find something, you're being harassed. And it may seem convenient at the time, but two wrongs don't make a right. And what we've suffered now is we have a very difficult situation with communities that are very suspect about the police. And we've had lawyers and doctors, we've had educated people talking about how rotten the police are. It's all stemming from that. The people who are there to enforce the law, to enforce your rights, to do so in a lawful, objective, cool manner, should not be made to be the villains. How will they help you if they're vilified, if they're doing things? Because I don't know who is really taking the blame for that, but it's the officers and the ones who get prosecuted and the ones who get vilified, and it's the officer. I don't think the mayor or any of the police commissioners, you know, have really been penalized for that.
And a lot of people say to me, and they ask me, and this in my campaign, like, well, what are you going to do about crime? What are you going to do about violence? And this is the question I always ask: do you have a crime plan? And my answer to that is, look, I'm not an expert. I'm not a former police officer. I'm not former law enforcement. So I'm not going to come in with a plan, a quote-unquote plan, that I'm going to go to a professional police officer, or in this case, a commissioner, and say, I'm a city council member, this is my plan. You know, am I going to work with the commissioner? And as mayor, are you going to work with the commissioner? Absolutely. But I always tell people, we don't necessarily know, number one, who the commissioner is going to be. It could be Commissioner Outlaw, could be someone else, because that is decided by the next mayor. Right. So we don't know who that's going to be, and I'm not going to ask you what you're going to do about the police commissioner, because you may not know yet.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. You can. You want to? What is your plan then for the commissioner?
So yes.
What do you think you're going to do about Commissioner Outlaw?
Yeah. So I think the first thing is, you are correct. As a council person, I was a council person. You legislate. You approve the budget. You may vote against the budget. You may pass laws, things like that. However, you do not tell the police commissioner what to do. You may suggest things and recommend, but that's the mayor. The mayor leads the city in terms of its public safety. The idea that the mayor appoints someone who then leads us, that's incorrect. There is a lot more to public safety, even in law enforcement, than simply arresting people and patrolling. So the full gamut of city services and agencies are brought to bear on making sure that the public is safe, and that the laws are enforced, and that all the support mechanisms to the officers that are patrolling, deterring, arresting, combating crime are at their disposal. So in that sense, the mayor should know what they want to do, and I do know exactly what I want to do. The next thing is, I have to appoint a police commissioner that I have full confidence in, who understands that I am in charge, that the police commissioner must agree with my plan and execute it. The police commissioner then selects a command staff that agrees with them and will execute what they want, and so forth and so on, right? And so in my sense, I believe that it is important when I go in that I select a police commissioner that is known by this city, a police commissioner who has spent a good many years and proven themselves to the people of this city, someone who is respected and admired by the police themselves, someone who is respected and admired by the citizens. Now, there are people, you have choices, and so I have spoken to that person, and I do keep it confidential right now. So once that person is in place, number one, we are short 1,300 police officers. And the main thing that I tell people is we will continue to be short so long as police do not want to continue to work for the city of Philadelphia, and people who want to be police officers do not want to come to the city of Philadelphia because they do not feel that they can do their job here. They feel
and the fear is that number is going to go increase. And we could look at the drop numbers, and we know there are a lot of officers
it's
who are going to retire.
Continue, right? And part of how we started our conversation was about returning citizens. I mean, you also need a functional prison system. When someone is arrested and when the judge orders them held for court, if there's no capacity to hold them, they're on the streets oftentimes looking for the witnesses and the victims, and that's not a good thing because now people don't want to cooperate. Because there isn't capacity, you have overcrowding. Because you have overcrowding, you have people who don't want to be in our correctional system, and then you have people that are being put in solitary confinement and other things that are not.
And right now we don't have enough correctional officers.
Right, we don't. Yes, so we have an abusive situation. And I think what happened is politicians do not want to increase capacity because they'll be accused of basically mass incarceration. That is absolutely incorrect. You have to do your duty. If you do not have capacity, you're not creating crime. You have to accommodate the needs of people. We don't put people in jail. The judge determines that, and then we have to comply with what the needs are. But we can estimate what is the average amount of people that are coming in and out. Now, we're a county facility. We're not a state facility. So most of the people that we have are awaiting trial. And they are presumed innocent, even if they have a criminal record. They're presumed innocent on that particular crime. They should be treated with a level of humanity and civil rights. But the fact that you don't have capacity actually is the reason why it's being violated.
Sure. And this goes, and this was a story that I heard today when I was in the car a lot, and you may not have heard it, but it's the juvenile justice system.
Oh,
they are overwhelmed.
Right.
And the state doesn't have the capacity to bring these juveniles in, so they stay in Philadelphia. And the problem is this, and there's no such thing as time served. If they have to spend 6 months in a state juvenile facility, but they don't get there for 7 months, that means these juveniles will now have gone 13 months in a system that they were only required to do for 6 months. And I never understood that until today, or even realized it. And I understand now that I listen to the story, they need 6 months and they want them to have rehabilitation. They want them to have therapy. They want them to talk to counselors, which is why that quote unquote time served does not count because they're not doing anything. And there are kids lying on
the floor. Yes.
They don't have beds. Look, they did a crime, so they need to do the time. But that's completely unfair. That you're telling a kid,
I
was a 15-year-old.
I was in the juvenile division, so
you are
absolutely correct. Listen, the point of the juvenile justice system is not to punish; it is to rehabilitate in the best interest of the child. And so there's a maximum amount of time that can be served, 4 years, or when you turn 18. So if 4 years is from, let's say, you're like 14 years old, the maximum you get is until you're like 18, right? But if you're 17, the maximum you get is a year. Because there's a maximum.
Would you then go to an adult facility, or it's
you're
over?
Done. You're over, unless you're certified as an adult, right?
Okay.
And during that period of time, it is to do what's in the best interest of the child. So the judge then orders you to undergo this, let's say, as you mentioned, rehabilitative program. Well, it didn't start because you were like in Philly for like 6 or 7 months.
And by no fault of their own.
No fault of yours, awaiting to go. But while you're being held there, awaiting to go, you're not receiving any service at all. And that's the whole point. Like, you're supposed to undergo this beneficial service. It starts when you get there, right? And so that is a big part of this problem. It is just kind of a reflection on like something that was not anticipated, right? Like, basically from the court's perspective, this person is supposed to receive this education, counseling, all that stuff for their own good. Well, nobody was expecting that you'd be sticking around in Philly for 7 months. And so from the perspective of the juvenile, has that been overall beneficial or not? Like, they're really upset that they were sitting around for 7 months through no fault of their own, and now they start this program.
I mean, I would think the answer there is you cannot put these kids in a facility for 7 months and then tell them, by the way, you only got 6 months, but you're still going to do 13. I mean, I know it's not a perfect solution, but there's not capacity. I think you send them home because they're not in school. I mean, I can't imagine they're getting any education.
They're lounging around, right?
They're lounging around, they're sleeping. So,
right.
I mean, I find that to be insane.
And one of the things I got to say, Drew, is part of that is like half-baked good intentions. Like, what happened is there was a problem at some of the juvenile facilities, and properly it was raised. But then what happens is they're shut down with no alternative. So now there's no capacity. Like, yes, if you have to shut them down, yes, if you need to address the problems, where's the alternative? So now what happens is you've lost capacity. There's overcrowding. If you take juveniles that have done violent crimes and you just don't do anything with them, that's not good. If you order them, to receive these beneficial services, that's wonderful, except that's overcrowded. And in the meantime, you don't have any space to put them. This often comes up, for example, when people talk about closing facilities. Like, we have the issue about, when there is a deportation and someone is being held in a county facility. Yes, it's a problem because of the conditions of the county facility. But when people say shut it, they have this idea that if you shut it, their loved ones are going to come home. They're not coming home. They're going to end up going to like Western United States. They're going to end up in like Louisiana. That is far worse, in many cases, because as long as they're somewhere around their family can get them a lawyer, their family can talk with them, they can help process the case. Many times, with help of family and friends, they have enough to begin a case for them to legalize here, things like that. Without that, it's a very quick process. And there's a law, at least many years ago when I was practicing law, you cannot keep someone in this detention for more than 180 days. If you keep them longer than that, you do have to release them, and then you'll have a process. It'll slow down because they're no longer, being detained.
So I want to ask one question. We're coming toward the end, and this is a question, again, I'm always asked.
Yeah.
On the city council trail. Mm-hmm. Drew, would you declare a state of emergency in the city of Philadelphia? My answer is always the same. No, because I can't do that. City council doesn't have that power. Only the mayor does. And a follow-up answer I give is, and by the way, if you declare a state of emergency as the governor of Pennsylvania, there's a process, there's protocols of what that means. It really doesn't mean much in the city of Philadelphia. So if a mayor does declare a state of emergency, that state of emergency needs to be defined by the mayor. So I'm going to ask the question, and I'm sure you've been answered. Would you declare a state of emergency in the city of Philadelphia for crime and gun violence if you were?
Well, I'd have to look into it.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really know what it means.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I tell people. There's no definition thereof.
When you declare a state of an emergency as a mayor, typically what happens is we have a change of rules. So now, because there's an emergency, the checks and balances are reduced.
And there's no defined rules.
Yeah, so what happens is I get more freedom to do what I want without city council having the ability to see what I'm doing and stop what I'm doing. Like, in other words, we have certain rules that I can't just give out contracts without the approval of council. State of emergency, I might be able to just do that without council approval. So, you know, the thing about it is people will want the mayor to declare a state of emergency because they feel like the mayor is doing something.
And Mayor Kenny has not done that. And people
He has
criticized
not
him for
done
that, including some council members.
Yes. And you know, there's no magic to, like, in other words, if I knew, for example, that if the mayor declared a state of emergency, we would end up with like 50 state troopers, state money, federal resources, money would be unlocked for all kinds of like addressing crime. And okay, declare a state of emergency. But if that is not the case, maybe what happens is we should deal with the fact that if we all did our jobs and allowed our police to do their jobs, we wouldn't have a need for a state of emergency. You know, people have different opinions. I've been very clear on my opinion because of my background, both as a attorney, and I've done criminal defense, and as a former prosecutor, and as a legislator, councilperson who's been very much aware of a lot of the issues here. Not policing and not responding to people and not providing people a level of safety is debilitating to this city. It is abusive to the citizens of the city. Now, if somebody is living in gated community and they feel perfectly safe and they're saying, well, there's no problem in Philadelphia, I would say that's fine. That's your opinion. But you can't speak for all the other people. And there are so many other people. It's just not your experience and mine, Drew, going out there and dealing with people and looking at the news and how many people are randomly shot and killed and murdered all over our city. It is also in the statistics and the data and everything. And so the first thing is, you know, if you live in a community and there is, let's say, an armed person kicking in your back door, you call 911. The first thing you may experience is nobody's picking up the phone. That is the first thing that has to be addressed. Yes. There's no excuse for that under any circumstance. And then, if there are only 2 patrol cars for your entire district and they're already engaged in something, what are you supposed to do? So there has to be a reasonable amount of patrol cars and vehicles and uniformed officers. I think drones would really help. I think a drone coming out to your house before anybody can even get there, you know, because we're not trying to catch the guy in the act in your house. We're trying to make sure they know, look, a drone's here, it's talking, it's shining a light, it's videotaping me, I need to get out of here. And then we'll follow that person because, yeah, we don't want this person going to some other person's house. But the drone technology would be very helpful, and having, you know, the appropriate number of officers available. So I'm not just looking at the total number on the roster. How many are available to you when you need them? Throughout the city. Yeah. Yes. Right. Yeah. Yes. People will understand that if there's some loiterer who is, kind of sitting on your steps, being abusive, if the police are busy, they'll understand that. You know, they won't like it. They'd like to know that sometimes when they call, an officer come out and address those situations before you have to step out and address it.
And that's what could happen. It's going to escalate.
That's what happens. Escalation. Yeah. And what that has resulted in, Drew, as you know, is people purchasing guns. Like the proliferation of guns in our city by people who are law-abiding citizens, but really are doing that because they feel like they cannot count on the police. They can't count on the criminal justice system. They're defenseless. That is a fault of the city, but not providing a core service it should provide. But that has resulted in part from politics, and I would say, kind of jumping on the bandwagon without really the responsibility of really thinking ahead, like what happens when we do this. So I have said very clearly we have to get to a full roster, and then we have to look at where the police are needed in addition, because you always have to do a little more, or sometimes a lot more, when you've allowed things to get out of control. And we have enough officers leaving every year that those numbers will come back down. And people ask me, well, where are you going to get the officers from? We have plenty of places to get officers. First of all, they have to want to work here. We have to have people, and there are plenty of them, who want to do a great job, who want to follow the law, who want to protect people's rights, who want to put themselves at risk of bodily injury or death on behalf of other people. But they want to be that person. They don't want to have a job where they're stifled, stymied, vilified, sit in the car not answering. That's not the life that they're choosing. But for example, in our city, for some reason, we have not hired veterans to the degree that we should. We are below the national average. Veterans are very well trained for this kind of thing, and we can draw in a lot of them. We have not actually hired a lot of immigrants who are eligible to be police officers, who have language abilities, cultural sensitivity, and I think those are two very good places where we can increase the recruitment of potential officers. They go to academy, they pass the tests, and all that type of thing.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on. We're at the end.
Yeah.
We're going to have you on again, and
Yep.
next time we won't talk about crime.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of other important issues: economic
Yes.
prosperity, decreasing the poverty level. There's a lot of things that you, as mayor, are going to want to do. And as much as it's an important issue, we're talking about crime, there are a lot of other issues
Yes.
that actually, in the long run, can decrease crime in
Yes.
Philadelphia. So again, thank you for coming on. We'll have you on again soon. I want to thank everyone for watching. You were watching Usula Media and the Republican Zone. I'm Drew Murray, your host. Talk to you soon.
The Republican Zone is brought to you by Drew Murray,